Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hey everyone, this is a friendly reminder that we are here for entertainment purposes only. We may not even be that entertaining at times, but this is not medical advice. Talk to your doctor, check with your healthcare professionals before making any lifestyle changes or medicine changes. What we're talking about is our clinical experience and what we've seen. And so if you really want our advice, you can consult us. You can actually consult me as a doctor, or you can consult my guest and get all your questions answered. But we can't give free medical advice because we can't pay our bills with that, but we can help to educate you a bit and allow you to think a little bit, and always reach out to your medical professional before making any lifestyle changes. Thank you. Hey everyone, happy January. Believe it or not, we made it to 2024 despite the craziness of the last couple of years. So just want to thank my sponsors for making these podcasts possible. Health Code, Get Health, GETHLTH.com. Great shakes. They helped me get through the holidays, helped some of my family and friends and tons of my patients get through. If you're struggling with not being able to put on weight, if you're one of those rare people in the world, we're using it to help put muscle mass on people. And also for people who are going through surgery, can't eat, this is the healthiest thing you can do to stay nutritionally sound. Also, they have a 20-year shelf life on some metal packs that they're doing for us, those of us who think the economy is going to go crazy and we have to have an emergency kit just in case. So Health Code, they have the vanilla chocolate macadamia. You can make tons of recipes from it, and it is nutritionally sound. I'm recommending it a lot to my seniors who are struggling with memory issues and trying to get them on a low carb ketogenic diet and have sound nutrition. So that's my plug. I love these guys. They're a great company, great people, and they even have a vegan option now for people who are choosing that path of eating. So please get health. And also Keto Mojo, I've been using them a lot. I was away from home and did not bring my Keto Mojo, and I was bummed because I did a couple of longer fasts and changed my diet a little bit, and I wanted to see the results. And guess what? This guy who's sponsored by Keto Mojo left it at home. So I will be grabbing it as soon as I get back home, and we'll be checking my ketones. They're a great company, a lot of great resources there, to get back on track after the holidays. So Keto Mojo, keto-mojo.com. Thank you both for sponsoring this episode, and thank you for your continued support. Here's to 2024, everyone. Hello and welcome back to the Low Carb MD podcast and Life's Best Medicine podcast. We just decided we're going to do another episode because I know we're not going to get through all that we have to get through today. It's such an honor. Georgia Eid, psychiatrist, very, very, very nice person. Harvard trained. We won't hold that against her because there are some good people coming out of Harvard for sure. She is the recipient of the Metabolic Mind Award from the Baszucki Institute. It's just amazing what she's doing. She has a new book that I think is probably the most important book that any of you can read. I've been reading it. I'm like spellbound by it. It's amazing. Change your diet, change your mind. The reason I love it so much is, maybe 4 years ago, Tro and I were talking about this, the effect of diet on mental, and we saw it in our patients. We saw it clinically, and we had doctors attacking us for even saying that diet had anything to do with mood. So doctor, welcome. So great to have you. And thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to see. I haven't seen you for a long time. It's really nice to reconnect with you. And thanks for inviting me on to talk about these important topics.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, but we met, like I was just a nobody and showed up at a conference, and there was one seat open. It was next to you. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's Dr. Eid. I was like all nervous and stressed out. And you were so kind and nice. And then I said that your husband, Michael Eads, which is a different person, who was so nice. And you're like, oh, thank you. And then you didn't say anything. And then I found out, I messed up. So clearly you're not married to the other Dr. Eads, which is a different spelling I know now. But welcome. It's so great to have you. And tell people about the book. I'm so excited about hearing about it, and reading it was just astounding, the science and neurotransmitters and understanding all this. So give us a little primer on what you experienced and what your personal experience has been.
Well, first of all, thanks for taking a look at it. The reason I wrote this book is because I feel really passionate about helping people understand the powerful connection between food and mental health. And most people are not aware of, how important it is, how much the brain cares about what you eat. And for people who are aware of that powerful connection, the information that they're getting in most cases is incorrect. And so if I'm walking through the grocery store, I'm listening to people talking about brain food in the grocery aisles, they're talking about, superfoods and supplements, putting more blueberries on top of their oatmeal, those kinds of interventions. And they really are all of that information about superfoods and supplements, plant-based diets, excuse me, all of that information is a really grand distraction from the most important pieces of information that actually work. So what people need to know, if I had to summarize this book in a nutshell, which is difficult to do, it's really about understanding how the foods you eat nourish, protect, and energize your brain. The food choices you make determine what your brain is made of, how it functions, and how long it's going to last. And so if you understand what the most important things are to do with your diet, you can have a tremendous impact, not only in your current mental health, but in some cases within a few days or weeks, but over your long-term mental health and your risk for things like dementia, Alzheimer's disease. So these are really powerful tools, but you have to have the right information. And most of the information that people hear is unfortunately incorrect. It's not useful.
Yeah, because most of us, probably the scary, I mean, cancer is a scary diagnosis, and we see how that's metabolically associated also. But most of us are worried about getting dementia or Parkinson's and all these other diseases as we get older and being a burden to our families. And to know that we can do something to prevent it or at least slow down the progression is huge.
It really is huge. And I think people don't realize how much control they have over their mental health because the information that they have about how to feed your brain properly is incorrect. So most of us, as a result of the incorrect information, have been about nutrition in general, have been feeding our brains improperly our entire lives and expecting our brains to work properly. So it doesn't work that way. So if if you believe that the diet, influences our health, which of course I think most people do, it's really the question is which changes are most worth making and why. And so, will it help you to switch to a plant-based diet? Will it help you to eat more fruits, more colorful fruits? Will it help you to stop eating red meat? Will it help you to eat more superfoods? Things like turmeric and so forth. And so the answer to all of those questions is no. More dark chocolate, more red wine, none of that works. So, but what does work is understanding three things. The brain has to get the nutrients it needs. It has to get all the essential nutrients. And so in order to feed your brain properly, nourish your brain properly, you have to know which foods are capable of providing those nutrients to the brain. So a big part of the book is, here's where the nutrients are that you can actually access and that you can deliver to the brain. Step one, nutrients. Step two is you have to protect the brain from damaging ingredients in the diet. And no, it's not about avoiding red meat, for example. It's about avoiding all of the modern ultra-processed foods, and the two signature ingredients of modern ultra-processed diets, which are damaging our health from head to toe, are the refined carbohydrates and the refined seed oils, so-called vegetable oils. So, and then the third thing is you have to understand how to energize your brain, which foods energize the brain safely and which foods make it more difficult for the brain to obtain energy. And so that is really energizing the brain is all about keeping your blood glucose and insulin levels in a healthy range. If you do those three things, if you eat nourishing foods, avoid the damaging foods, and keep your glucose and insulin levels in a healthy range, your brain will be healthier than 99% of other brains on the planet. And almost nobody is eating this way because, again, we are given the wrong information about how the brain works and what it needs to function properly.
And in recent years, we're finding out there was a lot of fraudulent research or poor research with the SSRI class in particular, and with these plaques, causing dementia. And so now we're starting to step back, and we have a different perspective from a metabolic standpoint. And you do a great job in your book of talking about the blood-brain barrier and how saturated fat's not going to cross over, and your brain is making saturated fat. And we all know our body's not going to make something to try to kill us. So maybe we could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so people often worry about their cholesterol levels and heart disease, and people worry, that if they eat too many, for example, if they eat too many eggs, too many high cholesterol foods, that's going to raise their blood cholesterol level and put them at risk of heart attacks. And so, not only is that not true, and we don't have time to go into that today, but what you're bringing up as a point I make in the book is that cholesterol is a very important vital molecule for every cell in the body. Every cell in the body has a membrane, and every membrane contains cholesterol. It's part of what helps the membrane retain its shape and function. So every cell requires this cholesterol. But the vast majority of cholesterol in your body doesn't come from the food you eat. It comes from inside your very own body. Almost every cell in the body is capable of making its own cholesterol, and including cells in the brain. And what's really interesting about cholesterol in the brain is that you do have cholesterol in your bloodstream. Some of us have more than others for a variety of different reasons, but none of that cholesterol can cross into the brain. And yet, the brain is one of the most cholesterol-rich organs in the body. And so it contains a copious quantity of cholesterol. And so where does all that cholesterol come from? It's not coming from your diet because your brain can't extract it from the bloodstream. Cholesterol is a big, bulky, waxy molecule, and it's too big and bulky to cross the blood-brain barrier and go into the brain. So the brain makes every molecule of cholesterol itself on purpose, on site, without any help from your diet, from scratch. So, and as I like to say, why would the brain go out of its way to make a molecule that's bad for you? It wouldn't. It's really smart. It's a brain. So it knows what it's doing. And so this is just one of the many distracting myths about nutrition that interferes with people being able to eat a diet that's suitable for for proper human nutrition.
And as a primary care doc, obviously we worry about the entire body, the whole organism. So when you see people knocking their LDL cholesterol down to 30, you think there's going to be a problem with that. As far as even talking about, making testosterone, estrogen, vitamin D3 or vitamin D, you look at these and the other thing that I've noticed all along in my career, and I know it's controversial, but this is what I've observed, I'm just saying it, is I've seen a lot of vegans come in with mental health issues, with depression, anxiety, stress. And I always wondered, is it cause or effect? Is it that you're idealistic and you're this way to start with, and the diet makes it a little bit worse? Or could it be that the diet itself is causing the problem with not getting enough fat in your brain and cholesterol? I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Sure. There's a whole chapter in the book called The Plant-Based Brain, where I talk about the pros and cons of so-called plant-based diets. Plant-based diets can mean many different things to many different people. And what I think is really important about that conversation is that we pay attention to the quality of the diet. So, for example, I worked in college settings for many years with students, and many of my students who were my patients, ate either vegan or vegetarian diet, primarily for compassionate reasons, not necessarily for health reasons. Although the messaging that most of us hear from journalists and online is that a side benefit of following a vegan or vegetarian diet is better health. So they were making the choice for compassionate reasons, but then viewing the better health as the icing on the cake, that not only were they doing something good for animals and for the planet, but they were also doing something for their health. That's the line that we need to stay away from, because whether the other reasons for eating plant-based diets, and there are perfectly legitimate and respectable reasons to choose that route if that's what you'd like to do, if that's what's most important to you. If, for example, compassion for animals, that is certainly a reason to choose a plant-based diet if that's what's most important to you. But it's not a vehicle to improve your health. And this is my job, is to help people understand that if they choose particularly a poorly supplemented vegan diet, they are placing their whole health at risk, including their brain health, particularly women who are planning families, who are planning to conceive, who are pregnant, and who are breastfeeding and raising young children. It's really, really important. There are certain nutrients that can only come from animal foods that are critical during particularly the first 1,000 days of life. And so I want people to have the information that they need. I wrote that chapter so that everybody could benefit, and that everybody, regardless of your dietary philosophy, can make changes to their diet that will improve, optimize their brain health. So, for example, if you have listeners who choose a vegan or vegetarian diet, there are tips in the book about how to make that dietary pattern better for your brain. So just like everybody else, you need to avoid the refined carbohydrates and the vegetable oils, and you need to get your nutrients. So, and you need to keep your blood glucose and insulin levels in a healthy range. So
Yeah, and that's a critical thing, is talking about, you could be eating Oreos and say you're vegan. And so there's definitely healthier vegan approaches, right? And again, we all agree it's the ultra processed foods that are the problem. So if we could all come to and say, let's try to cut that out as much as possible, and then go to whatever end of the spectrum, because I don't like to have judgment on people. I'm just saying this is what I observe, and I think there's religious reasons, there's a lot of ethical reasons. I get it,
yeah.
for sure. But Health Code, who sponsors this podcast, just came out with a pea protein, like a purified fermented protein that's going to be better absorbed. So you go, okay, like, do what you can to support people where they're at, and then saying, okay, if you choose this way, here's what you need to supplement, what you need to do. And that's what I loved about your book. Not just saying that's crazy, you can't do that, but you have to understand that there may be some toxins that you're going to deal with. And I think there's a lot more that we're seeing with the coatings they're putting on fruits and vegetables and all these you start looking at going, oh, this is not natural anymore. And plus all the how the GMOs and how these bananas we have here are nothing like what you see naturally.
Yeah, I mean, I like to tell people, and I am nutritionally pro-choice, so I'll support you and help you optimize the diet that you feel most comfortable eating. So just give information that's useful to people so that they can make the changes that are going to be most impactful. So coming back to your original question about, do people who follow vegan diets, do they have poorer mental health? It's really, first of all, there are no studies that can help us understand this question. There's never been a study designed, a clinical trial designed to ask or answer that question. So what I see in my practice, and when I'm working with students who are eating who are eating vegetarian and vegan diets, they were just as unhealthy as everybody else. And was that, were they less healthy than other people? I can't really say, because most of the students I was seeing were eating an unhealthy diet, whether it included animal foods or not. And so that's the confusing variable, right? Is that we're not looking at people who are eating so-called whole food plant-based diets. The whole foods element often gets left off the description, right? If you're eating a whole foods diet that's low in animal foods or free of animal foods, then you may be healthier than someone who's eating a junky food that contains animal food. So it just gets really murky. And so we don't have, and it's another point I make in the book, a lot of people believe, they're under the impression that we have scientific studies that show that plant-based diets are healthier than diets that contain animal foods. But unfortunately, the studies that have been done comparing plant-based diets to animal-based diets, they change too many things in the diet to be able to figure out whether the reduction or elimination of animal foods has anything to do with the health benefits that they observed. So so far, we don't have any evidence that eliminating animal foods from the diet leads to any health improvements whatsoever. And of course, it would make sense. We've got lots of information explaining to us why, if you remove all of the animal foods from the diet, you're actually putting yourself at great risk, because there are just certain molecules that you cannot get from plants.
And I think in your book, you do a great job of going through the scientific method, first of all, was great. And then talking about, okay, here's randomized control trials, here's our best evidence. And you look at our food pyramid and how it was based on these surveys that people take, like, what did you eat for the last 2 years? And like, how in the heck are you going to know how many times you ate pizza? No one knows those things. And so we're basing our guidelines on this, and our population is getting sicker. And it seems like it's time to reevaluate and say, wait a minute, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of I think the main problem, the reason why we have such poor information about nutrition, why we have, for the most part, the wrong information about nutrition, is because most of what we see in nutrition headlines, food study headlines, and even in our national guidelines, most of that information doesn't come from scientific experiments or biological reality. It comes from these very flawed questionnaires that where, as you were saying, they'll ask, 10,000 people, how many cups of blueberries did you eat on average over the past year? And nobody can answer that question, or questions like it. They'll ask you a handful of questions, maybe at most about 130 questions about food. And, when there are thousands and thousands and thousands of foods on the market, they're only asking you about certain ones, as if the rest of them don't count. And then what they're doing is the questionnaires force you to quantify how much of each particular food you've eaten over the past year. When I eat a fairly limited diet, as you may know, I can't tell you what I ate a week ago. And so
I think the only person I know, while we're talking, I'm thinking about Dave Feldman, probably can tell you exactly what he had, because I think he takes pictures of everything he eats in his hand next to it, right? So certain people, like, he's the only person on earth that I know who does that. We'll talk to him and try to get him straightened out. But those kind of things, when you're trying to figure out, and I've always wondered this now, and I see people they're always fatigued and tired and depressed, and have no energy. It's like, look what you're eating, and once if we tweak that a little bit and see what happens. And when you see these miracles happen, I'm telling you, like, as a matter of fact, Fat Fiction, like we talked about before we recorded, we had like 5 of my patients up on the stand, and they go, you sit down, you can't ask them leading questions, we're going to ask them questions. And the amazing thing that came out of that is every single one of them, they go, yeah, I reversed my diabetes and all this other stuff, but all of them said that their mental health, their depression, anxiety, stress got better. And they cut it out of the movie because it was too controversial at the time.
Honestly, oh my gosh,
It never made the movie. And I was in tears watching, because I was like, wow. I mean, reversing diabetes is one thing, but to give someone, like, one lady, she said it, like, a fog opened 2 weeks in and she could see clearly. And she went to see her neighbors for the first time. She started exercising because she felt like it. She started cleaning her house, and everyone else started crying on the stage. And you're like, wow, how powerful is that? But we didn't have you then to say, yes, I mean, you were around, but having this book out where people can look at the science and how you document it all, it's amazing, actually.
It really is amazing. And I include patient stories in the book because, you can talk science till you're blue in the face, but really nothing cuts through, nothing resonates like a human story. It really resonates with people in a way that the biochemistry doesn't, right? And that's really, really the power of those stories, I think, is really important. Because we do understand quite a bit more than you might think about how certain types of dietary changes improve brain health, and why it would make perfect sense that it would improve all aspects of mental health potentially. But until you hear somebody's experience with it, it might be hard to believe. I mean, a lot of people, I certainly never thought about the connection between food and mental health, even as a psychiatrist. In 4 years of medical school, 4 years of residency training in psychiatry, never once in those 8 years did anybody talk about or teach about the connection between food choices and mental health. So I would understand if many people might think, what you're saying sounds really, sounds far-fetched. It sounds, as though, how could that possibly be the case? How can you make these few simple dietary changes, and they're not easy, but they are simple, How can you make these few dietary changes and expect your mental health to improve within, in some cases, 3 days, in other cases, more like 3 weeks, and maybe on the outside, maybe 3 months, the 3 day, 3 week, 3 month. That's what I often will tell people, how long it takes. How can that be true? But if you understand what the brain needs and how to improve its nutrition, it makes perfect sense that would improve brain health. And then one of the things you just said, so important, this mental clarity, the sense of mental clarity that people get when they improve their diet in certain ways. That's the phrase that I hear most commonly is mental clarity. Another phrase I hear very commonly is calm, focused energy. People they have more mental stamina, they get more done, they are less irritable, they kind of roll with things more easily. And they just feel like their brain works better. And it does. It works better. If you feed it properly, it works better. Just like putting the wrong kind of fuel in a car. Put the wrong kind of fuel in the car, it's not going to work right. You bring it to your mechanic. There's nothing wrong with the car. It's that it's not being fed. It's not being given what it needs to work properly. And so it's just like bringing yourself to a doctor and saying, hey, there's something wrong. There isn't anything wrong. You're just not feeding yourself properly. And your doctor's not going to be able to fix that for you. Only you can fix that for yourself. And that's the most empowering part of this work, is that I'm not working with patients. I mean, I've been working with patients for years and years and years, as you know. I've been a psychiatrist for 25 years. I'm not fixing people. I'm just giving them the information and the tools they need to fix themselves. And in so many cases, again, within a short period of time, people can experience better brain health than they have ever experienced before. And if they can get to that point, just make these few changes and try it for a few weeks, then they can decide if it's worth it to them to continue with those changes on a longer term basis. So what the book does is it says, here are the changes I think are most worth making. Give it a try. Give this a try for at least 6 weeks, and 12 on the outside. If you can do that for yourself, it's such an important investment in your health. Just see what happens. Even if you don't believe the science, even if you're skeptical, don't take my word for it. Try it and see how you feel, and then make a decision about whether you think it's worth it to make these changes longer term.
Yeah, I think one of the most remarkable thing I've seen is when I started doing this, I was surprised by the mental health benefits and the mental clarity that came back. And then I told people who had depression and anxiety, go start journaling and just see. And then it's amazing. A month in, they'll look back and go, oh my gosh, I was so negative and down and fatigued and I hated life. And I can't believe that was me. And to see that change in people just from cleaning out the brain cells and allowing your brain to get more sensitive to that glucose in your brain, it's amazing what happens.
It really is. And, I think like so many of us, Brian, when I first started experimenting with my own diet back in, oh my gosh, it must have been 2009 or so, that was one of the first things that I noticed. And that's how I became interested in nutrition in the first place, is I made some changes to my diet to try to help myself with some physical health issues that had cropped up in my early 40s. And as I was experimenting with my diet, I noticed my mental health, which I'd never thought, had major issues to begin with. I'd get some winter depression. I thought that was normal. I'd become stressed on Sunday nights about going to work on Monday morning. I thought that was normal. I would get really anxious and irritable, with if I was under stress. I thought that was normal. And to a certain extent, those things are, we're not supposed to be perfectly smooth sailboats all the time. But when I changed my diet, all of that went away. And I thought, that's interesting. These changes that I made to my diet seem to be good for the brain. And so I wonder if there's something to this. I wonder if and that's when I really started studying nutrition. And with the goal of trying to help all of my patients, most of whom were not getting better. I mean, that's the fact in psychiatry these days, is that our practices just slowly fill up with people who aren't getting better. We'd change medications around. We, trial and error. Let's try this medicine. Let's try this medicine. This one didn't work, or this one's causing you side effects. Let's try this. Maybe you should switch therapists. Maybe this therapist isn't the right kind of therapist for you. We do everything we can, but most people don't get better.
It's
Or they
amazing.
get
Yeah.
better.
One of the tragedies I've seen with psychiatry is my patients will ask him, what did your psychiatrist say? I was there for 8 minutes, ask if I have side effects from the meds, this. And like, no, like, how's life? What's going on? Like, are you working in the garden? What are you doing with your life? Nothing, nothing. They're just adjusting meds, checking labs, and charging a bunch of money.
The problem with psychiatry, there are many problems with the field, and I love the field, and I understand the pressures that psychiatrists are under. Believe me, because I've practiced in many different settings and experienced those time pressures, and the pressures from insurance companies to keep visits short and to keep them medication focused. So the worst case scenario in psychiatry these days, and they're definitely you'll run across this quite a bit, is the 10-minute med visit, right? So you go in to see a psychiatrist. You'll see a therapist for counseling, somebody who's not responsible for managing your medications. Most psychiatrists nowadays, unless they're working in private practice, are working for clinics or hospital systems where they are paid to do what's called psychopharmacology. They're hired to do psychopharm, which means medication management. And insurance companies do not pay very much for psychiatry visits. Most mental health clinics lose money because they're under reimbursed from insurance companies, and so you really can't make a living. And I know this from experience. You can't make a living spending half an hour to an hour with every patient you see. You simply cannot. You will go broke. And so good psychiatry, good mental health care takes time. So even if I'm only thinking about medications, which was never, I mean, every job I had, I always incorporated some psychotherapy into my work, and never always had at least a half an hour for all of my patients. That's not the norm, but those were the systems that I practiced in. And so if you have a half an hour with somebody, you might be able to understand what's happening with their medications, but that's pretty much all you're going to be able to understand. And so you're not going to be able to have time to talk about much else that's going on in their life, including the quality of their diet. So this is why another reason I wrote this book is I want to put these tools directly in the hands of people who may not have access to them otherwise. Because if you go to your psychiatrist, they're likely not going to have the time to talk to you about these things. And they may not have the interest in nutrition. They may be mostly interested in medications or other forms of treatment, which is perfectly fine. But if you want a different route, if you want to understand how to improve the very foundation of your mental health, which is its metabolism, its structure, its function, then you can do that. There's a lot you can do even without professional support to improve the quality of your diet, and therefore really, and I mean this quite literally, experience a different state of mind. And I think it's really worth exploring.
Yeah, I think it's important. One thing you brought up in the book that I thought was amazing too was talking about, that with psychiatric meds that they have a 50% improvement rate. But with a placebo, it's a 40% improvement rate. And you go, oh my gosh, how much of it is because I'm taking this pill and I think it's going to help me, right? Because I've personally, my go-to in my practice was Lexapro for people who had major anxiety, and they would get better. And I would see the anxiety get better. I go, this is placebo. Like in 2 days, you're better. It doesn't make sense to me. But maybe there's something to that helps some part of it. But maybe it's this whole, like, the way addiction works is we just flood our brain with dopamine, and then the receptors downregulate to protect themselves. And then all of a sudden you just don't get that rush anymore. So from our experience, and I would love to hear your opinion with food addiction, like what's happening with some people can have half a cookie and go, okay, I'm good. That was great. I enjoyed it. And other people have to have 8 cookies, right? Because there's diminishing dopamine, there's diminishing return on the dopamine centers.
Yeah, so there's two things in what you just said. So one is, whether medicines work and whether they're worth taking, and having practiced for 25 years, and I still prescribe medications even to this day. They have a place, and they can be helpful in certain situations. The judicious use of medications, especially in crisis situations or in people who aren't able to change their diet or lifestyle for a variety of reasons or who choose not to. Medications are really important, but they don't work as well as we wish they did. With antidepressants, they have a pretty poor track record. But even the best medications, the most effective medications, let's say, the antipsychotics and the anticonvulsants, which are used for more serious mental health conditions, even they, don't work for, more than, say, 25, 30% of the time. So that we're leaving most people without meaningful relief. And this is really tragic. So, so now we come to the second part of what you just mentioned, which is food addiction. So when I work with people to try to improve their diet because their medication isn't helping enough, or they don't want to take medication, or the medications are giving them too many side effects, I work with them either to combine that medication with a dietary strategy or to use a dietary strategy instead of medication in some cases, or to try to help them reduce the amount of medication that they're taking, right? So, but what is my major roadblock? My major roadblock in helping people improve their diet to improve their mind is food addiction. And so that is because, if I say to people, oh, well, let's look at the amount of sugar in your diet and see if we can take a look at that. Because if you flood your brain with too much sugar, that's every time you do that, if there's too much sugar in your diet, then there'll be too much sugar in your brain. And if there's too much sugar in your brain, you're getting damaging waves of inflammation and oxidative stress. And that seriously unbalances your neurotransmitters, things like dopamine and serotonin and GABA and glutamate. So, let's start there. Let's take a look at lowering, first of all, getting all the refined carbohydrates out of the diet, sugars, flours, juices, cereals. Let's start there at least. That's really one of the most impactful steps a person can make if they're trying to improve their mental health, is get all of the refined carbohydrates out of their diet. It's very difficult for people to do that. Even just that simple step. We're not talking about keto. We're not talking about paleo, although I think those are both really important. And both of those strategies are in the book, really powerful strategies. We're just talking about cleaning up the diet. It's so hard for people to do because, as you know very well, these foods are designed to be addictive. These processed foods are designed to, hit all of those pleasure sensors and to be, and to give you this feeling that that you can't get enough of them. You can't stop eating them. They're designed to do that. It's a really, really unhealthy relationship. And these foods are not satisfying. These foods are not nutritious. These foods are really toxic because they're loaded with refined carbohydrates, which cause damaging inflammation and oxidative stress in the brain. And they don't contain any of the nutrients that your brain needs. And they're often full of vegetable oil as well. And vegetable oil also causes inflammation and oxidative stress in the brain. So we're eating all of the wrong things and not enough of the right things. But food addiction, this addiction, especially to ultra-processed foods, is a huge barrier for people improving their mental health. I spend most of my time on my appointments with people working on relapse prevention and, how to sustain a healthy diet. It's one thing to start one up. Because it's all exciting in the beginning. It's another thing to maintain those changes, as you know very well, I'm sure, with your own patients. So this is a huge, huge barrier.
Yeah, and the way I see it is all these things are leading up to dementia and people in nursing homes. There's a guy named Hal Cramner who's here in Arizona. He's not sponsoring the podcast, but I'm just saying it's amazing what he's doing, because I had him on the podcast and he was doing having people, he would say that these people would come in and they would put 6 packets of sugar in their coffee, right, just to function during the day.
Mhm.
And when he started getting them on a low carb ketogenic diet, and to see that their brain can run, if your insulin and sugar receptors aren't working well, then guess what, you go back to the ketones. And he's seen remarkable things in seniors when they start changing their diet, getting a little exercise, getting stimulated with music or whatever they enjoy doing, going on field trips, whatever it might be, that these people are leaving his place and going back home because they can function again. It's amazing.
It is amazing. He's doing really, really fascinating work. And this is a field where, most people, there's kind of a funny mentality, as we get older. people as they get older, they're entering their 70s, 80s. You feel like, you know what, I'm just going to eat whatever I want. I deserve at this point in my life to eat whatever I want. It's not about vanity anymore. Young people are often motivated by, keeping, looking fit and healthy and attractive, right? People who are in their 70s and 80s, most of them don't care about that anymore. So there's like, oh, well, why shouldn't I enjoy the rest of my life? Why shouldn't I have this is this is the most important time in your life, perhaps, to be especially diligent about what you eat. Because it's one thing to, I mean, we're all going to die. We're all going to die, right? None of us gets out of here alive, right? And I think, most of us, at least the way I think about it anyway, I'm not really afraid of dying. I'm afraid of becoming disabled, mentally or physically disabled, and, having other people need to take care of me, not being able to walk, not being able to think, not being able to remember things, not being able to take care of myself. And that's what I think, that's the tragedy. So, and what I wish more people knew, which is again why I wrote this book, is that you can prevent most of these things from happening to you if you have the right information about how to eat. So if you, like you were just saying, if you fuel your brain properly, it will serve you well. It will serve you well throughout your lifetime if you take good care of it. It's not designed to deteriorate. It's not normal. So a third of adults, and that's a huge number in the United States, will eventually develop dementia of some kind. That means the 2/3 do not, right? This is not inevitable. This is not normal aging. So people have a lot of control over their intellectual future if they have the right information. So if some of your listeners are, entering their golden years, you want them to be golden. You don't want to deteriorate. And the food choices you make are determining on a day-to-day basis how well your brain is functioning, not just in that moment, for the rest of the day, but also long-term. Because dementia doesn't happen overnight. It's gradually, slowly, silently creeping up on you in the background for about 20 years or more. And before you will even notice any memory problems. And this is really, really important information for people to understand, that if you have insulin resistance, which means you're eating too many of the wrong carbohydrates too often, you're overwhelming your insulin signaling system, you're flooding your bloodstream with too much sugar, more than it can handle, really damaging that delicate insulin signaling system, these hormonal systems that run your whole metabolism. If you're damaging that with too many refined carbohydrates, too many of the wrong foods too often, over time, that is going to restrict your brain's ability to access energy. And therefore, your brain can be swimming in a sea of glucose. You're eating a sugary diet, it's getting plenty of sugar, but it's still going to be starving to death because your brain has become insulin resistant. And the insulin can't cross into the brain as well. And without enough insulin, your brain can't process glucose as well and turn it into energy. So the more sugar you eat, the harder it becomes for your brain to use sugar for energy. I know it sounds upside down, but that's the paradox. You don't need to worry that your brain's not going to get enough sugar. You need to worry that your brain is not going to get enough insulin. So that's the key, is keeping your insulin levels and your glucose levels in a stable, healthy range.
Awesome stuff. That's so true. And I think we'll have you back to discuss this topic, but we're in a major pandemic of suicide. Fentanyl overdoses in our young people, our best and our brightest, are dying left and right. And it seems like society is not really putting a lot of attention on that. And a lot of it has to do with this processed food, and going through college and your stress and this. Please, everyone, buy this book, because when you see what's happening to our young people in the colleges, that how the suicide rates going through the roof, and overdoses and mental illness, it's just like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen when these people are seniors, senior citizens? And we're in a big problem if we don't fix this nutrition part of it.
We really are. And, of course, nutrition isn't the only factor, but I think it's one of the most important and one of the most powerful factors. I think it's a big part of the story. It's not all the story, but it's a huge part of the story. So why not start there? I mean, you have tremendous control over that one piece, right? And so, yeah, and we're working. I worked in college settings for about 13 years. And the longer I worked there, the more it felt like I was working in an emergency room or a crisis clinic. I mean, there were students coming in every day in crisis, needing hospitalizations, you know, and needing leaves of absence, and just really having tremendous difficulty functioning, and without lots and lots of support, even if they were able to stay in school. And people were arriving on campus as first year students, already taking 2, 3 psychiatric medications, already having a history of psychiatric hospitalization, as in childhood and teen years. People were arriving on campus much more fragile. And this is when you should really be in the prime of your life. This is when, your brain should be functioning at its best. And there's no way you can study or learn if your brain isn't functioning properly. And so this is a huge, our global mental health crisis is really where you really see it getting worse and worse. You can see it, it is on college campuses. And so it's a microcosm of what's going on everywhere else. And, almost none of the students that I encountered in my 13 years were eating a healthy diet.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. So we're gonna have you back just to talk about that. So I have to ask you, because I know you're pressed for time, as am I. What's life's best medicine for you, for Georgia Eden? What's life's best medicine? Where do you go to when things are hard? What do you lean on when we're going through these last crazy years? And where do you find, or what motivates you to move on? What's life's best medicine for you?
Oh, do I have to pick one? Let's see. I would say, there are three things that really help me. So, one is eating healthy diet, of course. Another is, and this is very important, they don't talk much about in the book, but is exercise. That's another piece of your metabolic health, right? So diet is king, exercise is queen. You have to have these two things, these two pillars, to keep yourself well and healthy. And then the third thing are all the intangibles that whatever is most important to you. So in addition to social connection and having a lot of love in your life and support in your life and healthy relationships in your life, is also having joyful pursuits. So whatever makes you really happy and kind of helps you lose track of time, kind of lose yourself. You can't just work all the time, and you have to have something in your life that you really enjoy, that you really look forward to. And so, for me, the types of things that make me happy, that take me outside my head and connect me to something larger. I'm not a religious person, but it's sort of more, we all have a spiritual world, is music and nature. So for me, getting outside, going for a hike, going for a bike ride, walking on the beach, and or singing with other people, music, playing the piano, like listening to really good music. These kinds of things they transport you into another realm, and I think that's really, really important, is to take care of that other side of yourself as well.
Awesome answer. I love it. Yeah, you have a standing invite to come stay at our place here. We have a guest room for you guys. So, but thanks for all you're doing. This book, everyone listening, this is a huge deal. Doc, how do people find you if they want to track you down?
Yeah, so I have a website called Diagnosis Diet, or if you just type my name in, because I have a pretty unusual name, it'll pop right up. So my last name is spelled EDE. And so the website is a place you can get lots of free information there, lots of free articles. And there's more information about the book there if you're curious to learn more about the book. And I'm also on social media. Just started an Instagram account not long ago, but I'm also on Facebook, LinkedIn, but I really spend most of my time on Twitter, X, whatever you prefer to call it. That's where I spend most of my time engaging with people. If you have questions or want to follow some of the information that I'm sharing there.
And I'll tell you, everyone listening, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. Go grab this book because I'm telling you, it's amazing. I have mental illness in my family, and I'm excited to get this out to people. And I know that you just did an audiobook that's going to be coming out. So if you hate to read like me, I'd rather listen to the audiobook, but I don't have it yet. So darn it, on my long drives back and forth to California, I can listen to it. But that will be coming out. So keep an eye out for that. But this book is outstanding. I mean, I'm blown away by how much information is in there, how much you're going to understand the brain, neurotransmitters, how everything works, and the importance of nutrition. So this is a great one. This is a great way to start the year out, to have a great guest like Dr. Georgia Eid here. Such a blessing to have you. Thank you, and keep up the great work. And we will have you back to talk about the food addiction stuff, early childhood trauma, how that affects us, and what's happening in our colleges right now with depression and overdoses in young people. I think that's worth an hour of time. And so I'll rope Tro in. We'll do it on Low Carb MD and then flood it back over to this side, because I want everyone to hear the message. People struggling with bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, all these things, there are nutritional benefits out there, and there are resources, and we have the data now. We had clinical experience before, now we have the data, thanks to Dr. E doing some great work. But thank you. Get on to your next meeting, and have a great 2024.
I really appreciate you inviting me on. Thank you very much. It's great to see you, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify, or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information, and hopefully this helps you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.